Welcome back to Through Your Hill, my friends. I'm so glad to have you here today. Today we're going to be talking about sourdough bread. And the recipe that I have been relying on more often than not as of late is from a book called Bread of Life, written by Abigail Dodd. Now what I do before I start making my bread is I pull out my sleepy sourdough and I allow it to get acclimated on the counter. And obviously during this time I feed it so that it will be nice and active and bubbly in order to make bread. And as you can see, mine here was very active and ready to be used. Now I go ahead and measure out 700 grams of warm water into a glass bowl. And then I will also take a scoop of my sourdough starter and put that into the water, and this will be my leaven. Now is the time to mix it together and get it all incorporated. And next I add my flours of choice. For today I'm using mostly all-purpose white flour from King Arthur, and then the rest will be all-purpose einkorn flour. Next I add in my salt. As you can see, I'm using a kitchen scale here to measure. If you don't have one, I highly recommend it. It's great for bread making. So often these recipes call for grams, and you will need a scale to measure grams. Now I'm going ahead and giving it a rough mix. It doesn't have to be perfectly mixed together, but just enough so that the leaven is incorporated into the flour. And in case you were wondering if we were going to get our hands messy during this process, the answer is yes. Now it's time to cover your sourdough mixture and preheat your oven to 350, which I will explain more in just a moment. At this point, you can put your sourdough starter away. That is, of course, unless you'll be using it anytime in the near future. And now let's get back to that oven. After the oven has preheated to 350, you turn it off. Abigail Dodd recommends allowing the oven to cool down and then placing your dough in a warm oven to help it rise. You don't have to do this step. You could actually just put the bowl of dough on the top of the oven. It's really your call. At this point, I take this opportunity to knead my dough a couple times, and then I stick it inside a warm oven, obviously turned off, covered. I wait 30 minutes, and my dough has risen. And now again, I will go ahead and knead it. And you can see here I am using the stretching and pulling method. This ensures that your bread will be nice and fluffy. Go ahead and cover it again. And now the second time I place it on top of the oven. I come back several hours later and I will knead it again. This process is repeated several times throughout the day. It ensures a fluffy, beautiful loaf that you will simply love. You can see it's a few hours later, the dough has risen, and I will do the stretch and fold technique again. Obviously, this book that I use gives specific directions, but what I have found with bread is if you allow it to rise and then come back and stretch and fold, and allow it to rise and come back and stretch and fold, and you do that many times throughout the day, you're pretty much going to be guaranteed a good loaf. You can see it's risen again, and I am doing the stretching and folding method again. This is your final kneading process before you put the dough into the refrigerator overnight. I'm just finishing up the process here, and I'm going to cover it and allow it to sit for another hour on top of the stove. Later in the evening, just before bed, I come out and I flour my counter. Now you will see that the dough has risen quite substantially, and it has a great feel to it. It's nice and puffy, and it's really a beautiful texture. So now I take it out and I put it on a floured surface, and I just prepare it into a big lump. Then I take my bench scraper and I cut it into 2 separate lumps. Now I'll go ahead and do just a little bit of kneading with each lump. And I will cover them and let them rest for about 20 minutes or so. Once I have gotten my bread baskets prepared, with adding a little bit of flour to the bottom, I place my lump of dough in the bread basket seam side up. Now it's time to cover these with plastic wrap. Once it's nice and covered, these little baskets of dough will go in the refrigerator overnight until tomorrow morning when I'm ready to bake them. Alright, first thing in the morning, what I do is get my oven preheated to 500. I also stick my Le Creuset into my oven that's heating up so it's nice and hot, ready for the bread. Next, you'll go ahead and unwrap your bread dough. Stick it on a piece of parchment paper. And now it's time for the truly fun part of scoring your bread and making a pretty design. I just love this part. Now it's time to put your bread in the oven. I pull out my Le Creuset and take the lid off. And then I just plop the bread right into the Le Creuset with the parchment underneath. Stick the lid on and close up the oven. And about halfway through, you take the lid off to get a nice crispy browned top to your bread. You leave the lid off for about 20 minutes, as you can see. And after the timer goes off, you pull your delicious bread out. At this point, your house is beginning to smell like a bakery. And there you have it, delicious, crusty on the outside, soft on the inside, just a delight to enjoy. I really hope that you enjoyed this video today, my friends. If you have never tried your hand at bread making, I highly encourage you to do it. It's such a gift to those around you, including yourself. I appreciate you watching today's video, and I look forward to seeing you in another one very soon. Goodbye for now.